Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Saro McKenna, co-founder and COO of Dacoco, publisher of Alien Worlds, to discuss why the Metaverse is promising for businesses. Saro, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill. It's great to be here.
Let's start with Metaverse business models. Most people associate it with AR, VR, and 3D worlds, but that doesn't encapsulate what the Metaverse really is.
Yeah, so that's kind of the graphical layer, but where the business models really arise is because of the co-ownership of the system through tokens. So metaverses are described by all of the tokens that are inside of them. So the NFTs, the fungible tokens, the DAO tokens, and the users co-own those tokens along with whoever created that project in the first place. And that's a big difference versus Web2 companies where they own the platform and users are just participating in it. And so that co-ownership creates all of these business models, all of these new ways that people are selling services to each other, making money off of that, where discovery happens. And yeah, it's an emerging way of doing business.
Why do you think it is so promising for businesses?
Well, it allows you to access people all over the world, and those people care about the health of what's being built, right? It's, when you're the co-owner of something, you feel invested in it, you are invested in it, you're a part of what is driving it forward. And that is just a fundamental difference between, a relationship that could exist between a vendor and a customer in which, there's just a one-way sort of selling of a service or a good for money. In this case, what's happening is that people are sort of sitting on the same side of the table, right? They're both co-owners. Sometimes they're offering a service to, one person is offering a service to the other, but at times that can switch. And what that means is that your customers care about the system as a whole, and their motivations for buying what you're offering are really different.
So let's say, for example, as it stands right now, Etsy is a platform where business transacts, people have their individual stores on Etsy. How would that be different than what you're suggesting with the newer business model? Is it because it puts them more directly in contact with the consumer and eliminates that intermediary?
Yeah, so I mean, some types of interactions could be very similar. Somebody could just be selling something that they've made, or it could be a digital item like an NFT to someone else. But then you look at, well, who are those two people? Why is the person who's buying that thing interested in buying it? Well, they might be interested in buying it because that thing is going to be significant for them in their place within the system, right? So they're not just buying, a tea towel on Etsy. They're buying, for example, an NFT that might give them a power within that metaverse that is then going to grow their position with the metaverse and also the metaverse as a whole. So their motivations as a customer are very different from just their own personal consumption. They are interested in being part of something and kind of growing their status. They might be part of a community. That thing might have significance for their role within the community and so on. So the first thing that I would say is that the motivation of the customer is a lot more complex than it is just in a sort of classical buyer and seller relationship. But the other thing is that the vendor is also different, right? So, the vendor could be, for example, a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. And the reason why that DAO might be selling that thing is, for example, in order to attract members so that then that DAO can, for example, compete with another DAO, or, they might have a real world presence outside of that metaverse, and they're trying to, promote a good or a service there. So I would say the motivation of each participant are different, and therefore the pricing models and the opportunity to extract profit is different. And then the other thing that you mentioned is around that platform owner. So in the case that you mentioned Etsy, which does take a cut, I think, of that transaction. So yes, in the case of, a metaverse in general, there would be no platform fee because, in fact, that transaction isn't really happening on a platform. The reason why the people got together was because of their shared membership of a metaverse, but they're probably just transacting bilaterally, and there probably isn't a cut. On some NFT marketplaces, there is a cut. So sometimes there can be a sort of platform fee that would be analogous to that Etsy example, but in many cases, there isn't.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought up community and how NFTs are being used to build more intimate spaces. It also makes me remind of kind of what's happening with Web3 gaming that is part of the metaverse universe, if you will. So explain to us really, truly, what is Web3 gaming? How is it different than what we understand gaming to be now?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm the co-founder of the largest blockchain game in the world by users. We have 7.5 million users, and we are a Web3 game. So let me describe for you what that means. So we're a decentralized game, and people are using their NFTs. So those are assets that live on a decentralized blockchain, and that I couldn't take away from them. For example, right? So if the platforms that my company is running stopped operating, those NFTs would still belong to the people in question and they would still own them. And in fact, what we've seen in some platforms is that those assets find a life beyond the initial use case that they were created for. And especially once a platform reaches a certain amount of scale, those kind of legacy systems start to kick in, where customers are actually taking the value forward themselves through propositions that were never originally envisaged by the creators of the platform. So the first thing is that our players are playing with NFTs that they provably own on a blockchain. They're also earning our fungible token. So that's like a cryptocurrency through playing. And then that cryptocurrency, in our case, it's Trillium, that describes their place within the system. So the more Trillium you have, the more governance rights you have on our DAOs. DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations, and our DAOs are competing with each other within a single metaverse economy. So you get this extremely vibrant and rich single metaverse environment where lots of different participants are using these tokens and they're playing against each other. And there's a huge amount of discovery that can happen through all of those people being within a single environment.
And finally, Saro, what will it take to make the Web3 gaming space successful? Do you think it will contain any aspects of traditional gaming?
Yeah, of course. I mean, all of the fundamental reasons why people play games are common across Web 2 and Web 3, right? So experiencing feelings of dominance and mastery, gaining a new skill, even meeting other people, and social gaming. But the difference really is that aspect of co-ownership. So that's the key difference between Web 2 and Web 3. In Web 2 games, the platform owner owns the content and owns everything about it, the levels that the player is leveling up through their accounts and so on. Whereas in Web3 platforms, the players own those tokens and they then are part of the story of the unfolding of the game. And that just creates an entirely different set of business models, but also an entirely different type of community that's far more evangelized to playing. So fundamentally, the reasons why people play games are the same, but their experience, I think, within Web3 systems is broader because their ownership of the system is broader.
Yeah, Saro, interesting insight. Thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks, Jill.